Media freedom is supposed to be a cornerstone of democracy by holding the powerful to account and keeping voters informed. But on this World Press Freedom Day, a new poll shows that many Americans are doubtful that the media is acting as a force for good. Nearly three-quarters of adults surveyed blame the media for increasing political divisions in the United States. Now, the poll was carried out by the Associated Press and the Nork Center for Public Affairs and the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. It also found that more Americans think that the media is hurting American democracy than protecting it. Well, my next guest tonight is Frank Sesno. Frank is an Emmy Award-winning journalist. He's now Director of Strategic Initiatives at George Washington University's School of Media and Public Affairs. And I have to say, when I was way back in the day when I was a news writer at CNN at the Washington Bureau, Frank was the bureau chief there. Frank, it's good to see you again. There's a lot to talk about. A lot of it's good, some of it bad. I want to start, though, with this new poll, which finds about 4 in 10 Americans saying that the press is doing more to hurt American democracy. Only 2 out of 10 say that the press is doing more to protect democracy. I mean, this is a real crisis of trust, isn't it?
Yes. First of all, it's good to see you again, and thank you for having me here. I think this is an important conversation. This is a really very serious problem. It's been in existence for some time. It's gotten worse, and it's fed on itself. So the more there is distrust in media, the more media actually heads for the corners of the ring where all the mud wrestling takes place, becomes more partisan, which then drives further distrust because people, the general public, says the media are not providing facts. They are leaning into the argument. They are adding to the shouting. They are increasingly partisan. And we have seen that. And it's been made worse since the Donald Trump era, when the president of the United States piled on and said the media, and then journalism actually, is the enemy of the people. And again, this has compounded problems that have been around for quite some time. So there's no easy way out of this. And it's a problem of epidemic proportions now, because it really is affecting the broader question of confidence in American institutions and a sense of what is actually factual, what is real, and what is not.
We're going to come back to that point about what is real and factual in just a moment. I'd like for you to maybe cast a glaze over across the Atlantic to us here in Europe. Public trust in established public broadcasters here in Europe, it remains, rather good, rather high, but there's a chorus of critics growing, especially against the BBC and against Germany's ARD and CDF networks. I mean, what does this look like from where you are sitting on the other side of the Atlantic?
What does the situation in Europe look like, or how does it translate over?
Yeah, I mean, what does it look like through American eyes?
Yeah, to these American eyes, it looks like sort of more of the same. We live in a time, and partly it's because of social media, partly because it's a time of immense polarization, as we have seen in so many places, in Europe as well, to include the United Kingdom and France and Germany as well, where the right wing has been ascendant. And it's not just sort of mainstream conservatives, but it's right-wing conspiracy theorists, people who otherize, people who demonize, and that is one of the big differences. There are global trends behind this. The sort of march of illiberal democracy, as we have talked about, kind of has this as one of its component parts. And part of that is to undermine and raise questions about, suspicions about the journalism and the news media, to raise questions about the actual kind of core information that people are getting, to spread doubt, to sow discord. And so that's what it looks like to me, that what we're seeing happen in Europe is not dissimilar to what we've seen elsewhere. And in some cases, it led the way in Europe, in certain countries, Hungary, Poland, elsewhere, where illiberal governments have used this as a standard kind of tool in the toolbox. And it works, unfortunately. It works because it does raise questions. It does undermine trust, not just in the media, but in other institutions.
I have to ask you about what was a huge case in the United States, Dominion versus Fox News. I'll just remind our viewers, Dominion sued Fox for airing false stories claiming that Dominion's voting machines were susceptible to hacking and that they had flipped votes in the 2020 presidential election in favor of Biden against Trump. Fox has agreed to pay, $787 million in an out-of-court settlement. Frank, you were an expert journalism witness for Dominion, and as I understand it, you would have testified this week if the case had gone to trial. I'm wondering, what would you have said?
What I would have said is that Fox News completely abandoned journalistic standards. And I've spent the last 8 months reading the depositions, studying the material, and obviously the trial didn't take place because of the settlement. But it's very relevant to the conversation that you and I are having here. Because what Fox did was to try to retain its audience, and it ended up pandering to its audience. Its audience attacked it for providing some of the factual information that they didn't like. To start with, when Joe Biden, during election night, won the state of Arizona, Fox was the first to call that, and the Fox audience piled on, criticized Fox fiercely, and Fox feared a loss of ratings. And following that was a series of several weeks of continuing to put on these kind of false claims about Dominion voting and fraud in the American elections generally. What this really does is it's kind of it's sort of a spotlight onto where journalism and media have gone terribly wrong. What I would have said is that the journalistic standards, seek truth, vet your sources, find credible people to speak up, provide context, correct errors. None of these things were done. And increasingly, we're seeing that media companies, some of them anyway, not all, there's still tremendous journalism that's taking place out there. But in being so desperate for ratings and eyeballs and clicks, in being so desperate for this in a hyper-competitive world, there are some very bad practices that have been adopted that are not consistent with what journalism should be. And that feeds the mis and disinformation universe, and it feeds the distrust because it undermines the factual basis that we need. And that's what I saw in the Fox case, and that's very much a part of the kind of thing that you and I are talking here about trust in the media in this country and elsewhere.
You know, the New York Times today published the redacted text message that reportedly led Fox to part ways with its star anchor, Tucker Carlson. I mean, Carlson, in this text, wrote about seeing a group of Trump supporters attacking an Antifa activist. And he wrote, we've just got a little bit of the quote here. It was 3 against 1, at least. Jumping a guy like this is dishonorable, obviously. It's not how white men fight. Yet suddenly I found myself rooting for the mob against the man, hoping that they would hit him harder, kill him. I really wanted them to hurt the kid. I could taste it. Then something deep in my brain, an alarm went off. This isn't good for me. I'm becoming something I don't want to be. Now, Frank, this text was redacted. It's now in the public domain. Are you able to talk about this, or is it off limits?
I can talk about what's in the public domain. I can't talk about what is not and what has been redacted. But I did not see this particular exhibit. Did not come across my desk as I was reviewing things. But what we have seen and what is public in some of Tucker Carlson's communications internally, texts, and emails, things that have been released through the pretrial motions and various other things as this case went through the courts, is a very harsh, very judgmental, very crude, very profane series of communications about colleagues, about Trump. He actually called Trump a demonic force. He said he's a destroyer in one of the communications that has been released and that we have seen and that I can talk about. But what Tucker did and what the others did that's even more remarkable is that they repeatedly said they did not believe, they indicated skepticism and worse, about the claims of election fraud and the Dominion case specifically. And yet on the air, they played up that narrative again and again and again. They brought on guests who promoted the wildest conspiracy theories and did not challenge them, knowing full well that that was wrong. Their own in-house fact-check unit debunked these things. Still, they put them on the air. They had repeated denials from the company and other very, very clear, good sources, and they did not put that on the air. And so when we look at why the public distrusts the media so much, some of that is because of this. because an organization like Fox News has gone out of its way to make things up or to feed lies in ways that are very, very damaging.
Frank, unfortunately, we're out of time, but it was good talking with you. We certainly appreciate your valuable analysis of this, and we'll keep watching to see what happens to U.S. media moving forward. Frank says no. Thank you.